All right, now you are going to want to take out your calculator for this next problem. So if you don't already have it out, take out your calculator. Okay, so I ended last video with saying that probabilities are difficult to calculate. However, we can often estimate probabilities. All right, so let's say that Bob thinks that his quarter has a greater probability of landing on heads than it does of landing on tails. So Bob wants to find the probability that his quarter will land heads up when flipped. Okay, so Bob is sitting there thinking, yeah, I think this quarter, I think it lands heads up more often. I think it's lucky. So Bob's going to sit there and flip his quarter over and over and over again to see what happens. All right, well, let's say that Bob's quarter is just a normal quarter, that it's just as likely to land on heads as it is to land on tails. So let's say Bob's wrong. Let's say Bob is just flipping a normal quarter over and over and over again. Well, I want to say, well, what's going to happen? So we want to see, well, what's going to happen? So we could actually do this, but we have a calculator that could actually simulate this for us. So let's have our calculator simulate what might happen if Bob flips his quarter 5 times, 10 times, 20 times, 100 times, and 1,000 times. So here's how we're going to get our calculator to simulate this. We will have our calculator generate a random number of either 0 or 1. So we're going to have our calculator to choose either a 0 or a 1 randomly. If the calculator spits out a 1, that will represent getting heads when Bob flips the quarter. So flipping a quarter and getting either heads or tails is just like choosing a number and having it either be 0 or 1. There's a 50% chance of getting a 1, there's a 50% chance of getting a 0. So there's a 50% chance of getting heads, and there's a 50% chance of getting tails. So to simulate this on our calculator, we'll use the randint command. If you type into your calculator randint 0, 1, that will cause your calculator to spit out an integer of either 0 or 1. So to find that on your calculator, you're going to hit the math option here, scroll all the way over to probability, and scroll down to randint. Type 0, hit the comma button, which is next to parentheses, 1, and hit enter. Okay, so when I hit enter, my calculator spat out a 1. So if Bob flips his coin 5 times, I ask, well, what percent of the time did Bob's coin land heads up? Well, let's actually do this. So let's have Bob flip his coin 5 times. Now, I already had Bob flip his coin once, and I got 1. To have my calculator repeat the last command that I just gave, you can just hit enter again. So I'm going to hit enter again, and if I do that, my calculator spits out another number. It spat out a 1, so I got heads again. This time my calculator spit out 0. I got tails. I hit enter again. I got heads, and then I got tails. So if Bob flips his coin 5 times, what percent of the time does coin land heads up? Well, my coin landed heads up 3 times out of 5, so that'd be 60%. Okay, so now picture your Bob. Bob thinks that his coin is going to land heads up more often. Now, should Bob be like, I knew it. I flipped my coin 5 times, and 3 of the times it came up heads, so I knew it. My coin really does land heads up more often than tails up. Well, no, that's crazy. He only flipped his coin 5 times. This could have happened by dumb luck. Now, if Bob flips his coin 10 times, what percent of the time did his coin land heads up? Okay, so this time I want Bob to flip his coin 10 times. All right, in order to get your calculator to flip a coin 10 times, you can type randint and do 0, 1, 10. And what your calculator will do is it'll choose either a 0 or 1, and it'll do that 10 times. So if I hit math, go over to probability, go down to rand_int, I'll type 0, 1, 10. And I'll hit enter. And now I see that my calculator gives me a whole list of numbers. I got a 1, followed by 2 zeros, a 1. Okay, so let's see. My calculator can't fit them all on the screen, so I can use the arrow key to scroll over. So let's see. How many heads did I get? 1. Whoa. Let's see. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh man, it's hard to tell. 1, 2, 3, 4,